Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I'm Stel Violaris. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about agriculture and about myself and about history. And really the reason I'm standing here before you giving this talk is that I've managed to escape the chain reaction of my career some years ago. Growing up as a bright child in today's society is quite tricky, really, because if you have any kind of talent or skills, it's quickly identified, and you're coached and you're developed. Teachers, your parents put time in to push you down a certain career path that fits your talents, and you may really be excellent at that. But what I think most of us in this room and most people around the world will find is that when you come out to the job market, the skills that you think you have, the skills that you develop, they're not really matching with what's out there. So actually you've got to then make a decision to find your own way in the world. And this is what happened to me. I would always been interested in biology and science and animals. When I was initially introduced to biology, it just completely made sense to me instantly. And as such, I dedicated my academic career down this path, resulting in being awarded a PhD studentship to look at ecotoxicology. After about a year of this, it became quite clear that the economics were just not adding up, which again I think is a very common thing in modern science. So I left science and went into finance, which was the biggest game in town in London, where I'm from. And I spent many years down that path, developing myself, learning more about finance and becoming a finance professional. Meanwhile, I had absolutely zero job satisfaction. I used to wake up in the morning and just dread the fact that I was having to go to work and to look at spreadsheets. But as with all humans, my passions of my youth did not go away. They're always there, bubbling underneath the surface. They manifested themselves in hobbies and caring for animals and activities. And ultimately, I was extremely fortunate in my 30th year to be offered the opportunity to actually live out my dreams and start a career working with animals. And I was at an age where it was going to be my last chance. I was 30, I was going to have kids soon, and you can't really drag your kids off to an adventure. And this is what I did. One June morning in 2010, my wife and I, Gail, packed everything we owned into a small car, plus our dog. We rented out a house, and off we came to Bulgaria to start a new life as ostrich farmers. I can tell by your stunned silence that you're quite surprised. It's a very similar reaction to that which we received from our friends and family, of course. We just thought we were crazy. What are you doing? You've climbed to the top of the mountain, and now you're going to go back down. But we were not to be deterred, and here we are 7 years later. We've built one of the largest farms in Eastern Europe. We've sell internationally. We've learned a lot, and I've lived more in the 7 years than I did in the previous 10. Thank you. I encourage you all to do the same. Back to the subject of this talk. Why ostrich? Stel, why ostrich? This is a question that I heard 1,000 times. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my rationale behind choosing ostrich. But really to understand why this animal has potential as a farming species for humanity, we really need to understand the whole history of domestication. Domestication was not a sudden event. It happened over many, many millennia, and it was sequential. We domesticated certain species, and we moved on to the next species. And each contributed to the success of the next domestication event. In the very beginning, we were hunter-gatherers, as you can see. We'd learn how to make tools, weapons. We could kill animals, eat them. We could wear their skins. And as always in human history, the young were trying something ambitious and new, while the old looked down upon their ideas and thought them foolish. See that guy on the right here is not too impressed with this guy trying to shoot the birds on the wing from about 100 meters away. He's wondering what a waste of arrows that is. Meanwhile, everyone else has not even noticed, they're just carrying on working regardless. So, much the same as modern life. And then bam, the Neolithic Revolution. Here we go, we've got dogs to take out for walks, we've got pigs to play with, we're raising grain, wheat, barley, we've got our cows that we're grazing, we're grinding up grain, we've got these cool houses to live in. Apart from it wasn't really like that. There wasn't really this mass exodus of animals from the forest that had just preferred themselves and offered their services as beasts of burden or food. It was a much slower process. And here's the timeline. This is the approximate time frame of domestication based on archaeology. Of course, this is always contentious. And you can see at the very, very beginning, between 36 and 15,000 years ago, we domesticated the dog. Of course, the dog is our most analogous species, being a social omnivore. So actually, if anything's a surprise, is that we didn't domesticate them earlier. You've all seen how cute puppies are. How did no one take a puppy home all those years? Of course, the truth is probably there was multiple domestication events throughout human history. Some were successful, some were not. And really, we just know what we know from the fossil record and archaeology. So the dog people, they had a huge advantage over your traditional hunter-gatherers. They could track prey over larger distances. They could bring down larger prey. They could bring down prey safely. They would be protected from their enemies by the dogs. They would be able to, in extreme cases, when there's famine and starvation and you have a herd of dogs, hey, you can eat the dogs. You can wear their pelts, their meat just like anything else. So we had this species with us for the next 15, 20,000 years, everywhere we went, and ultimately the dog people displaced the non-dog people. 40,000 years ago, you didn't have a dog, you might as well get back up a tree. And it wasn't until quite a long time later, actually, around 11,000 years ago, where some enterprising dog people in the Middle East worked out that if they could take this baby mouflon home that they'd gathered from their hunt, keep it alive somehow, keep it fed, keep it growing, there would come a time when they could just eat it. When game is scarce, there's your food right there. And of course, this is a huge advantage. And then we became the dog and sheep people. Now, the dog and sheep people, not only can they bring down larger prey, not only can they bring prey down more safely, also they have literally a larder, a store of energy that follows them wherever they go on 4 legs. And when times are tough, you have access to this energy. When times are good, okay, you don't need to, there's lots of game, you need to hunt, you don't need to kill your stock. And of course, this is where our friend the dog, again, proved his versatility. So a dog went from a hunting partner to a guarding partner. They could protect the animals, they could protect the sheep from large carnivores, such as bears and even wolves, and it allowed the large aggregation of sheep populations and the subsequent aggregation of human populations and civilization as we know it. Not long after that, we added the goat. Now, the goat is a very, very valuable animal in this circumstance because the goat is a browser, not a grazer. So it doesn't directly compete with sheep for food, and it can survive in much harsher conditions. So effectively, a herd of just sheep is a risky herd. When times are tough, you could lose all your sheep. If your herd is mixed, when times are tough, your goats do better, your sheep do less. Well, when times are good, everybody wins. And it wasn't, and then shortly thereafter, we domesticated also the pig and the cow, both in the Middle East. The Fertile Crescent was where domestication was occurring, and this is where human civilization sprung up. The cow gave us the advantage of a large herbivore that could protect itself against large predators, required less looking after, could cover larger areas. And of course, the pig is a very indiscriminate eater, and it came extremely handy in that period of civilization because it could literally turn all the unusable waste, biological waste, whether from agriculture, from hunting, from wherever, even human waste, and would turn this into delicious pork. So it was an excellent species. And really, these first 5, they are the key species. We domesticated other species later, but these first 5 started the chain reaction that would lead to our civilization and the world we know today. I said the graph was contentious. There you can see 9,500 years ago in the Middle East, they've recorded the moment when the cats domesticated the humans. This was a great deal for the cats. The humans provided huge grain stores, which is an abundance of rodents. They offered their fire for warmth, their laps for cuddling. And the cats has been doing very, very well out of this. And still now to this day, it sits at the very top of our species complex. We get very little from them. As you can see, once the main 5 species were domesticated, then really the large animals that were domesticated after that were ones from extreme environments. So you look at the llama and the alpaca from the altitude of Central and South America, and the camels in the Middle East, in the dry, arid deserts. And it wasn't actually until 4,000 years ago, if you look on that we domesticated the first bird. The first bird was a red Indian jungle fowl, which we now know as the chicken. And subsequent to that, you can see there was the chicken, again, gave us the opportunity of an animal that could convert pretty much waste, or they could forage, and convert that energy into a small parcel of an egg, which of course is very valuable in those days, and still to this day. And it wasn't until 2,000 years after this where the turkey was actually independently domesticated in North America. It should be Central America, actually. And the duck was not domesticated until 1,000 years ago, which is actually very recent. All very interesting, Stel, I hear you think. But what does it have to do with ostriches? Well, ostriches are on the graph, you might have noticed. If ostrich was on the graph, it would be right about where the duck's feet are. And it was first domesticated around 150 years ago. And you can see why. It's a huge, powerful animal. But really this wasn't the main reason behind the lack of domestication to that point. Once we had domesticated the chicken, we were able to domesticate something like a duck, because we could just take a duck's egg and put it under the chicken. It would hatch, and that animal would behave like a chicken and would not be scared of humans, would be easy to raise. You cannot hatch an ostrich egg under a chicken. Believe me, I've tried. So the ostrich was domesticated really when the technology allowed it to be so. So around 1850 in South Africa, the first artificial incubator was created, working on kerosene, and some of the first things that were incubated in that were ostrich eggs. Now, why haven't we domesticated the ostrich so far? Well, it's not as if we're not aware of the ostrich. We've been interacting with the ostrich for millennia. Here you see some of the earliest known human artifacts from 44,000 years ago. Down the bottom there you can see these rings that originally formed part of a pendant or necklace or similar accoutrement, and they're made from ostrich eggshell. In fact, the very oldest artifact ever found, around 60,000 years ago, is a necklace made from ostrich shells. In ancient Egypt, around 4,000 years ago, you can see that there's a young boy there at the bottom right, bottom left, taking his pet ostrich out for a walk. He's tied a bit of string around its neck. I'm not really sure how effective that's going to be. So the ancients were aware of ostriches, and their plumage was used, their meat was eaten, but there was never really the capacity to domesticate. The Romans, around 2,000 years ago, they were busy killing ostriches with clubs and making mosaics out of it. This is the classical equivalent of those, hunting selfies that cause so much controversy. What you're seeing now, I'm sorry for the resolution by the way, but what you're seeing now is not the skull of the first guy to domesticate the ostrich. It's actually the earliest known representation of our planet as a globe. It's a very significant artifact. This was created around the 1500s in Florence, Italy, and it's made from 2 bottom halves of an ostrich egg. So, why now? Why all of a sudden do we need to domesticate the ostrich? Well, I think the reason we need to do it is because we have a species now that has huge potential. And it's not like humans to ignore potential and waste it. The dodo. Imagine what we could have done with this bird. This was around 6 kilogram pigeon. Okay? This, had we not made it extinct within a few decades of coming into contact with it, I am pretty certain would be a major farming species today. Now, what can the ostrich offer us that we don't get currently from our species complex? Now, the main product of ostrich is meat. Ostrich produce meat at a more efficient rate than cattle. Ostrich meat is very analogous to beef, actually. It looks just like beef. If you taste it, it tastes like beef. If you didn't know, you would not be able to tell the difference. What's unique about ostrich meat is actually extremely healthy. It has lower cholesterol than beef, lower fat, and a higher protein content per weight than beef. Most importantly, that's great that it has those features. Most importantly, it's actually, the ostrich is very efficient at converting feed to meat. It has a feed conversion ratio of around 4. So for every 4 kilograms of food you give it, it will produce around 1 kilogram of meat. Comparable to other species, for example, cattle will have a feed conversion ratio of 8. So it's almost double. You have to put 8 kilograms of feed into every cow to get 1 kilogram of meat. Other species that are comparable to ostrich, things like pigs, Pigs have got a feed conversion ratio around 3 to 4, very similar to ostrich. And of course, the most efficient feed conversion ratio of all species is the broiler chicken, which is around 1.6, which is quite incredible if you think about it. For every 1 kilogram of chicken meat you're getting out of this chicken, you've only fed it 1.6 kilograms of feed. Now, most of those gains on the feed conversion ratio have been achieved in the last 30 years at huge, huge welfare cost to the birds. They can only live for around 8 to 9 weeks. They suffer pretty much their whole lives, but they provide meat for the ever-growing human population. I'm not suggesting we go down this path with ostrich, but we can certainly start on the road. Another major product of ostrich is eggs. An ostrich will produce around 40 to 50 eggs a year, with some of the more egg-intensive breeds, like the South African blackneck, producing up to 100. Doesn't seem like a lot, but just for the purposes of comparison of what can be achieved from domestication, the red Indian jungle fowl, the ancestor of the chicken, produces around 15 to 20 eggs a year. Commercial layer hens produce 300. So that is a factor of 15 times more eggs produced from the farm species, from the wild ancestor. And yes, these gains have been made over the last 4,000 years. However, half of that gain has been made in the last 40 years, which is incredible. I mean, it's not as incredible actually as the previous gains made by people that had no idea of genetics or the method of inheritance, but still, it shows what can be achieved. And of course, eggs and meat are not the only product of ostrich. The skin makes very good leather. The feathers are used in decoration, in industrial purposes. They provide a hypoallergenic stuffing for pillows. Every single part of the animal can be used. But really, this is about meat. This is the most important aspect to take away from today, is that an ostrich can produce meat, a healthier meat, better meat, more efficiently produced meat, at cheaper cost than ruminants, than cattle and sheep. But what's new? This has been the case for centuries. We've known that this has been the case for centuries. Why now is there really a need still to look at alternative production of meat? Well, the elephant in the room, of course, is climate change. Now, as you can see, production of beef is hugely intensive in terms of carbon equivalent release. For beef produces between 23 and 58 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram of meat. Just think about that for a minute. That is a huge, huge multiplier. And this is really, as you can see, pork is down around 7, and chicken is down there around 4 kilograms. So chicken, we know, is very efficient. Pork is also very efficient, but the ruminants that we currently farm are just creating a huge burden on our environment. And this can't be changed. You know, these are not gains that we're going to be able to change any of these numbers through selective breeding or even through genetic modification, because this really is just a feature of the ruminant digestive system. Most of what you see here is down to actually not carbon, but actually methane production. The ruminant digestive system produces huge amounts of methane, huge amounts of methane. You think this feed is being composted inside a series of different chambers and constantly burping out methane. This graph shows you the methane emissions per animal per year. It's not exactly equivalent because of the weights, but just to give you an idea, a pig weighs about as much as, a cow weighs about as much as 8 pigs. So if we multiply that up, we'll get to around 12 kilos. You can see that ruminant mammals produce around 10 times the methane of non-ruminant mammals. And this is not something that we're going to be able to change. In this current environment, where we're doing all we can to try and keep life on this planet viable, we really owe it to ourselves as a species to look at ostrich and consider whether actually we can make huge gains in terms of fighting climate change. Just to give you an idea, you all know the headline figures. The global emissions from agriculture account for around 40% of total emissions, which is more or less the same as transport. Now that's huge. And the vast majority of that, around 80% of that, is from ruminant production, from cattle and from sheep. And of course, methane is not the only issue. We have another very scarce resource on this planet, which is water. You can see it takes 15,500 litres of water to produce 1 kilogram of beef. That's quite absurd. That's really quite, I mean, it's not comparable to any of the other food products, yet still, meat production, still ruminant production is a huge and major global industry. But why is this situation allowed to continue? Why? Money, that's why. Beef is a huge global industry. There's 60 million metric tons of beef produced a year. That's 60 billion kilograms, or around 10 kilograms for every person on the planet. These kind of industries of this size, they're not going to go quietly into the night because they're now found to be unsustainable. They have huge amount of political influence, huge amount of financial backing, and they will fight tooth and nail to remain in the industries that they're in, to continue to make money, to continue to pollute the planet. In an ideal world, our politicians and the people whose job it is to look at the long-term future of the plan would impose a carbon tax on agriculture in the same way as they've done with the transport and the fuel industry. It seems perfectly logical. They're both polluting industries, both huge industries, and the cost of the product does not reflect the environmental cost of production. As such, it's not unreasonable for us as people to demand of our politicians and our leaders to create a carbon tax. But we all live in reality, don't we? We all know that's not going to happen. We all know that whatever regulations are brought in, whatever strictures are put in, all it's going to take is a few smart lawyers, and either they'll find a way around it or they'll make us pay the cost. So really what I wanted to ask you today is to take the choice in your own hands, okay? They're making beef because we buy beef, you know? The only way that we're going to change the future, the only way that we're going to improve our chances of passing on our genes in this biome is to make our own choices about what we eat. So I'll ask you today, next time you're in the supermarket or in a restaurant and you're looking at some beef or looking at some lamb, just think very carefully about the real cost of this meat to our planet. And if you can, try pork, try chicken, and if you want to try ostrich, I'm not going to stop you. Thank you very much.